So here I sit, early evening on Easter Eve, the birds singing, under the blossom of new life and at the conclusion of Holy Week. And here we can see how the King of the Elements as a title for Christ extends across the whole salvation story of all creation. But first, a reading about what we're celebrating. This is from Matthew chapter 28. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord, descending from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he's been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you." So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came to him, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." I believe this. I know that the accounts differ a little from one gospel to another, but the one thing they are all agreed on is that Jesus was resurrected. He didn't just come back from the dead. His whole human nature, that second element to his personality about which we spoke on Good Friday, was transformed as the first fruits of what we can all hope for. This is why we say, "Alleluia, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia." On Good Friday, we looked at what that meant from a Jewish sacrificial perspective and how Christ died as the scapegoat, destroying the consequences of our actions in a once and for all sacrifice that need never be repeated. But there's more to it than that. It seems to be something about our westernized mindset that we think everything is about us. All too often we consider the world to be there for our benefit. Yet at the beginning of Genesis it's made clear that we were created by God to tend the earth, to be the species that helps it to be the best that it can be. Yet in our destructive and sinful nature we've done the opposite. Instead of being nurturers, we've become exploiters. And the same thing applies to our perspective about the cross. We assume, because we're so anthropocentric, that it was all about us, but actually there's far more to it than that. Throughout this week we've taken a perspective on the traditional elements, earth, air, fire and water, and the role of the Spirit at the cross. And when we start reading the Bible properly, what becomes apparent is that God's plan for salvation is not just about humanity, it's about all of creation. This shouldn't surprise us when we consider what St. Paul wrote in his cosmic Christology to the Colossian church. Listen to his words again. This is from Colossians 1. "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross." This Jesus whom we worship is at the heart of all things. The universe holds together in him, and through his sacrifice God reconciled all things, both heavenly and earthly, to himself. when we start thinking about the world of which we are a part and the ways in which we utterly destroy it, we can see that God's plan is to undo the damage and to remake all things. The sacrifice of Christ was not just for us. People sometimes ask me if I'm a universalist. But what they mean by that is, do I think every human is saved by Jesus? I would say their question doesn't go sufficiently far. To be a properly universalist Christian is far more basic, yet far more all-encompassing. It is to say with St. Paul that Christ's death and resurrection is for all the universe. But how does it look at the moment? The devastating effect of the coronavirus has been to hit the pause button on our consumption. Planes are grounded. Traffic has returned to 1950s levels, and the air has begun to clear as city pollution and smog levels drop rapidly. But will it last? Will we take the opportunity to finally put the nails in the coffin of big oil and hasten its replacement with renewables? It's too soon to tell, and there's no doubt that our economies are creaking under the strain of a lockdown that is bringing significant hardship to those on the lower rungs of the economic ladder. So my suspicion is we will resume business as usual and go back to exploiting the planet which creaks and groans under our labours. Never have the words of St. Paul to the church in Rome seemed more appropriate. This is Romans chapter 8. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. The creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labour pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. When we bring this reading from Romans into the mix, what we discover is a sense of awaiting, a hopeful anticipation by the whole of creation that the work begun by Christ on the cross and continued through us, his agents of salvation, will finally be brought to completion in a new creation, a transformed creation. To the Colossian Christians, St. Paul referred to Jesus as the firstborn of creation. What he meant by that was that the resurrection which we celebrate at Easter was just the first, the symbol of hope to which we all must cling. This world is a not forever world. Yes, I firmly believe that a part of the work of Christians is to be enacting "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," and a part of that is to nurture creation just as God intended. But whichever way we look at it, this creation is not everlasting. Slowly but surely it's becoming more disordered. The increase in entropy, to give it its scientific term, it will last for a good long while, and it's unlikely we're going to worry about it in our lifetimes. But the universe, just like us, is aging. And as it gets older, so it becomes more uniformly cold. Stars burn their nuclear fuels, fusing hydrogen and helium into ever heavier atoms until they can fuse no more, at which point the star runs out of power and dies in a cataclysmic explosion. There's only a finite amount of nuclear fuel in the universe. And just as we can only burn fossil fuels for a finite time and eventually all the planet's reserves will be used up, so it is with the universe. There's only so much fuel. Eventually it will all be used and it will cool to a black, absolute zero. If we were to use St. Paul's language, we might call this the bondage to decay. And we feel this bondage to decay in our own bones as we get older. We ache in places that never used to ache, as an echo of all creation. Yet on a day like this, in our spirits we feel a rising hope, a sense of joy and expectation for what's not yet seen. We believe in the resurrection. And that means that heaven is not for us an image of fluffy white clouds and soft focus. Instead, it's of being more alive than we are now. The pictures the Gospel writers paint of Jesus after the resurrection are of a man who was more alive and more vital than he was before his death. And that is what's offered to us. He is referred to by St. Paul as the first fruits of the resurrection, which he offers to us all. Of course, we can't see this yet, and St. Paul says exactly that. Who hopes for what is seen? But St. John gives us a glimpse towards the end of his book of Revelation. This is from Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And the one who was seated on the throne said, See, I am making all things new. This is the ultimate consummation of our hope. In perhaps the most subdued circumstances in our lives, still we celebrate the resurrection of Christ. And though it may seem bleak at the moment, on a day when we should be shaking hands and hugging each other, we are in isolation, and yet the ripple of that first resurrection is slowly threading its way towards this ultimate endpoint, that all things will be made new. So wherever you are today, and however alone you're feeling, however you're doing, this is not the end. This is a celebration of the new beginning. May the peace of the risen Christ be always with you.